And welcome to Gunner Shot. Uh, we are back in air after a gap of about 4 5 days. I had to take this gap due to professional reasons. I was busy in my work with IIT Madras. But having said this, we are resuming with something very important with a person who's very knowledgeable in this. As you see, you can see General Hasnain next to me. And we're going to talk of leadership and command in combat. Mark the words. There are three words in it. One is leadership, the second is command, and the third is combat. Uh, Leadership is generally largely understood, but they don't. What people don't understand is the peculiarity of command and the stress of combat. Even combat is of two varieties. One is what you face in war, and the second is in hybrid situations, which is the norm these days. And in a country like ours, our commanders have to be prepared for both. And it's a huge, big thing. Why have I taken this subject? I have taken this subject for the fundamental reason that we are now looking at women to get into command. And people don't understand what command is, and they pass views, they write articles, and pass judgments, and even pass rules and regulations in the government. To a large extent, even people who are in the government machinery fail to understand what is command in combat, what is leadership in combat. Right? I'll not spend more time. This is the base introduction I want to give, but I'll add one thing. When we talk today of combat and leadership and command. Largely, we'll talk of what happens at the unit level, the commanding officer. We're not going to talk of generalship. We're not going to talk of what a general does to equip and train the army and all that. That is well discussed. People understand it largely. But what is not understood is the toughness of command at battalion level and brigade level. To some extent at the div level. We'll talk of that. The operational level, where you are in contact with the enemy, where you are smelling the sweat of your buddies, where you're handling the blood of your buddies. And that is what ultimately leadership and command this combat is all about. And that is where battles are won or lost, or they turn the tide of war. Right? I'll not go further. I'd request General Hasnain. He's got tremendous experience. He's been in Sri Lanka. He's been in, Eastern Ladakh in the Chushul Battalion. He's commanded along the LAC. He's been in the East. No better person to talk about this complicated and a very demanding subject. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, John Shankar. Thank you very much. And Jai Hind to all our viewers. This is a difficult subject to speak on because there's nothing written in the books, really saying. I mean, all of us look at this subject from a personal angle. What is our experience of it? How have we seen it on the ground? When you tell me there is leadership, yes, there's leadership in different walks of life. You have a political leader also. You have corporate leaders also, right? You have managers, people who are in staff, putting together resources, etc., putting together men also. But command is something very, very different. Command relates to combat, right? And it's an environment, a situation in which the commander, the leader, and the led are in a situation of equanimity. They are absolutely the same, right? They're exactly the same. One man among them is the leader. right? A couple of men, perhaps, couple of leaders down the line, maybe sub leaders, but there is an aspect of loneliness. There's one man on top who whose life is as as susceptible to any kind of action which may happen in the face of the enemy, and the men are looking up to him. This is what command is all about. No, a lot of people think, I've spoken to a lot of people outside in the civil world, and they tell us, "Aap to colonel hai." When I was a colonel, I remember, "Aap to colonel hai," and you must be sitting snugly in your office and directing the battle. See, ये समझ होती है लोगों की that they think that at a unit level that you can actually sit and direct battles, which means tell your men to go here and tell your men to do there. Let me assure you, no one follows your directions in battle if you are sitting in the ops room a couple of kilometers behind and directing battles. There's a golden rule. If there are 2 companies out of the 4 companies of a unit which have gone up, which are right and up in front, the commanding officer will be up in front there with those 2 companies. When the first company goes into assault, he is just behind the first company, directing the first company, and he will accompany the second company onto the objective when he has to launch the second company. And it must remember also, in today's world, it's not about a odd bullet being fired at you. Today, things are being fired at you from all directions. They're coming from drones, they're coming from shells and bombs which are landing on top of you, right? And maybe your own firepower many times goes askew and is landing on top of you. You are in an environment of utter chaos, and you have a plan in front of you. And they're commonly said that the first casualty of any battle is always the plan, which means that the plan which you have rehearsed and which you have practiced and which you have thought is perfect, everything goes up in the first minute. Now decisions have to be taken based upon the situation which is emerging. But everyone is down. Bullets are flying. Shells are landing. There are limbs going askew here and there. Blood is flying around. In the middle of that, you as a commanding officer, if your head is down, or if you are a company commander and your head is down, I can assure you, no man is going to rise up to do your bidding. You have to take control of the situation. That is what is command. That is where command comes. Where you are putting yourself at a greater risk than the men. Right? Picking them up from the ground and showing them the objectives and saying the same. One of the most important aspects of leadership and command, two words, follow me. Follow me. If you have that capability to demonstrate that you can do it better, as well or better than the men will follow you. And that's how a battle will progress. But the moment the commanding officer is seen not to be up to it, nothing will progress. No better example than the Battle of Dograin, I would say. If you ever heard of a man called Desmond Haid, right, commanding officer of the 3rd Battalion of the Jat Regiment. Gora Angrez, almost like an Angrez, was an Anglo-Indian, right? Spoke better Haryanvi than anyone. Lived with his men. Men loved him absolutely. When he was going into battle, he knew that he could be killed. He would lose a lot of manpower. You know what he told his men? He told them in the Jat language, he says, "Agar Sio Sahab marega, तो क्या करेगा?" Simple question. क्या अगर सियो साहब मर गया तो क्या करेगा? Are you going to run back? What will you do if your CEO dies? Question is very clear to the men. If the men see the CEO dying, it means that he's died for their cause, for the national cause. The answer that the judge gave him was, अगर CEO साहब मरेगा तो कंधे पे उठाकर डोगराई तक ले जाएगा. That is what command is all about. That is the spirit you imbue in your men, which gets that out of them, that passion, that madness which goes in battle. And that's why I always say, if someone asks me, what is the first quality of command that you require? Right? I can beat around the bush and I can say intellect and intelligence, dexterity of thinking and this and that. Let me tell you, from my side, there's only one thing which I have experienced in operations, and that is physical raw courage. Physical raw courage. The ability to understand your men, select the right man for the right job under those conditions. The last point I want to make on this issue at this stage, and we have much more to discuss, is the fact that many times we go wrong in selecting the men that we have with us in battle. We tend to think that the best in battle will be the gladiators from the sports fields, the gladiators in the unit whose turnout was outstanding, those who did very well in the section commanders, Umedwar Kader, someone who was an outstanding stick orderly of the CEO. These are all trustworthy men, good looking, good, smart turnout, always willing to listen and obey orders. But then somewhere down the line, you'll find a man whose turnout is awful. He's got a disciplinary blot on him, somewhere or the other. He tends to snigger once in a while at your decisions, and perhaps even talks behind your back. Sometimes such men turn out to be jewels in battle. And I've experienced this myself, where I've seen some of these people who I thought would never make good soldiers in battle have turned out to be the jewels of the unit. So, command is much more than normal leadership. As I said, raw courage, the ability to select, trust, right? And lay your own life on the line for the task and for the motivation of the men. That's what command is all about. Yes, Jan
So
Shankar.
I think you touched upon something very, very, very fundamental. Raw courage is what the commanding officer needs, to lead his men into battle. Now, here comes a thing which I would like you to dilate on. While the commanding officer needs the raw courage to lead and go ahead in battle and all that, but there is also an issue that the commanding officer, notwithstanding the fact that he has to sacrifice life, has to save lives, right? Because in that become the next thing. While saving lives, while being cautious, while being using his head or over his heart at times, he also has to achieve victory. And the third aspect of this is that it's not only that every one of us who's face fire always feels that churn in the stomach. Anyone who has not felt it is a liar, right? And everyone feels that thing. Who can overcome that and infuse courage into the other person is the quality which is required, and that is what raw courage is probably made of. I'd like you to dilate on this, sir, because I'm going to lead you somewhere from here.
Thank you for that. I think that's a very good takeaway from our opening gambit as such. The churn in the stomach, that awful feeling when you're going into operations. I still recall my whole unit going into a major operation in Sri Lanka, and the entire unit together. Very rare thing to see in hybrid operations, where a unit was going in for an assault, completely on a major camp with almost 300 LTT inside it. And here every man knew that he was susceptible. He could be killed in action. And you could see every man making his own little temple, lighting his own little diya, all around before the FUP at the concentration area, and praying, right? That is a time when you feel this little bit of a churn in the stomach. But you have to overcome it. You can't show your fear to the men. That is very, very important. You can't show that fear to the men. The second thing very important here is you know that your decisions are going to send some men to their death. It's a thing on your mind which weighs on your mind. And I know of many commanders who have been in action like this, who have suffered, whose men have suffered, have psychologically also come back affected by it. We are not robots. We are not robotic soldiers. Human beings that we are leading. We are human too. And we have those emotions and feelings. This is where someone outside doesn't understand the power of regimentation. Just does not understand the power of regimentation. Those who talk here about symbols are not necessary, etc. You know, my men swear by their royal red lanyard. The Garhwal Rifles wears a royal red lanyard on his right shoulder. I squirm today when I see that senior officers are being stopped from wearing their royal red lanyard. Because I can assure you, I spent 2 years in the Rashtra Rifles. I did not remove my red lanyard. I continued wearing the red lanyard. This symbolism is so important. I told you about Desmond Hayes. This is what it was all about. He had driven his men to a degree of passion. Here, I will die. If I die, will you be able to attain the objective? They said, we'll take your body right up there. We'll kill the last Pakistani and we will take your body right up there. That is the spirit which has to be driven in your men if you want to achieve success. That's what you spoke about. Very important question. That all this which you are doing in the face of fire, in the face of turbulence, which is taking place on the spot, is only for one purpose, the success of the operation. There's no point losing manpower there and saying, oh, it was a very difficult operation and I didn't succeed. As I said, I think I need to lighten the mood by telling you, I went past Indira Gandhi International Airport many years ago, while getting inside, when the airport was still a comparatively new airport. And I was horrified to see a large sign put up saying, we are the second best airport of the world. I told a lot of people, if the Indian Army says, we are the second best army of the subcontinent, you would not be sitting here today. For us, it is only victory. Victory in battle and nothing else. And victory comes at a cost. It is that cost which we pay. The army pays. The leader has to pay that cost through the lives of his men and perhaps his own life. So many times. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, sir. I think so. And what you said is very important. You know, the CO has to lead people to victory, and there's no second. There's no second place in battle. Either you are a victor or a loser, right? So, in this connection, I'd like to dilate. When we talk of combat, like I said in the beginning, we talk of two facets of combat. One is war, where you are under absolute no holds barred, fight with the enemy. The other is hybrid or less than war situations. Many times we call it even counterinsurgency and things like that. Now, what do you feel? I mean, I wouldn't say what do you feel. What are the differences in command between war and in hybrid situations? Both are tough. I mean, let me qualify it. Both are tough. But there are slight nuances. I would like you to talk of that.
Thank you. Let me tell you, in hybrid situations also, near war-like conditions get created many times. And these are different situations that we'll talk about as we go along. For example, I would say the 1987 attack on Sonam Post by Subedar Vana Singh was not a typical war situation. It was again hybrid. It was low intensity conflict in which we were fighting. But one of the most horrific actions you can think of. It was perhaps worse than even a hot war situation, where 20 men were clambering up a 80 to 90-foot wall on all fours and having to retain enough energy at the end of it to carry out an assault and kill the men on top who were firing at them. Right? I thought that demanded some tremendous amount of physical fitness, physical courage, and the ability to simply sacrifice yourself. If I was sending those men that time, I would have realized most of them will not return. The earlier assault by an officer had not succeeded in the case of 8 Jacqueline. Here, it was almost similar. So many times you'll find in hybrid conditions too, almost similar conditions will sort of get activated. Now you come down to, if you consider Kargil also in near war, Kargil also had such situations like with Vikram Batra and people like that, assaults which went into in the high altitude terrain, going up to 16, 17,000 feet. Over a sustained period of 4 or 5 days of exhausted soldiers climbing up and getting that last bit of energy out of them. I know commanding officers who were there, right there at 14,000 feet. They were right behind their leading platoons. And it's not without the CO that anything could really be achieved. Of course, there were some outstanding JCOs, some outstanding young officers there, but it is the commanding officer ultimately whose presence there made the difference. And that's why you always found commanding officers are the ones who are recognized. They are the ones who are put on a pedestal. Come to the counter-terrorist kind of hybrid situations. Right? Now, these can be very, very challenging. I can tell you, in a conventional battle, when you're moving up, the density of bullets which fly into that area may not be as high as you find the density of bullets flying from 5 terrorists with a weapon each, having 4 magazines each, 20 magazines being fired at you in a very short period of time. It's a huge amount of fire which comes, right? Yes, reducing a hideout, a terrorist hideout, can be a very, very challenging thing. And for that, you have to have selected manpower. Many times people ask me, when in senior ranks, people ask me, why is the army taking so long to, sort of reduce a hideout? Even someone as knowledgeable as Barkha once asked me this, as to why is the army taking 3 days to sort of reduce the hideout, reduce the resistance inside. And my answer to all of them was, if they ask me for 7 days more, I will give them 10 days more. We are not crazy. We don't send our men to death unnecessarily. Right? In hybrid, you have the liberty of time. In this situation, you have the liberty of time. That is a great privilege that is there with you. In actual combat and warlike conditions, time is not on your side. There are split seconds in which decisions have to be taken. And if you're delayed in those decisions, the situation is going to go topsy-turvy completely. Here, the preponderance of firepower is there with you too. You have a very large ratio. The men to terrorist ratio is also large. But the threat and the danger is very high. Because here, 2 casualties, 3 casualties is equivalent to 20 casualties in war. Because there are only 2 terrorists or 3 terrorists. And here, if you lose 2, 3 men, reducing 2, 3 terrorists, it is no great shakes that you have achieved anything. So this is the burden which is weighing on the head and heart of a commanding officer. I am under pressure. My higher commander is asking me for quick results. My higher commander is telling me that the media is asking, why is the army taking so long? That's where higher commanders come in. Where the higher commanders should be able to tell whoever from Delhi is ringing them to lay off. This is my battle. I will fight this battle. These are my men. If they die, they are my men still. So, this is the slight difference which takes place here. At the end of the day, moral responsibility is the commanding officer. The buck stops there. Nowhere else.
Yeah, I think so, sir. You made some very interesting points. The buck stops at the commanding officer. Yeah, there is no other position in the Indian Army where the buck stops. In fact, there's no other position virtually anywhere in India where the buck stops. And the buck stops always with the commanding officer because everything hinges around him. And you made the point that he needs to be physically fit, he needs to have a lot of courage, he should be prepared for sacrifice, and he should be able to handle pressure. The ability of handling pressure, especially in hybrid situations, is enormous. I would say pressure in hybrid is a little more than pressure in war because in war you have a definite order and you have a definite task. A lot of things are definite and you can take your decisions and certain things are there. But when you come to hybrid, there are no orders. Ambiguity is huge. You need to take decisions under absolutely no information conditions, and the outcomes are equally vague. You don't know what the outcomes are. You don't know if at the end of the day, just by killing 2 terrorists or 3 terrorists, whether it's a victory or a loss. And a tactical operation has strategic or even geostrategic outcomes, right? So I think the problem of handling troops in hybrid is a little more than what it is in war. Though both have competing things. Why I'm talking this, sir, is this. Today, when you talk of hybrid is 360. There's no front line. Everything is a front line. Your rear is also a front line. And we've been putting women officers in command by a court decree. While I have nothing against the woman, don't you think it's unfair on the part of the courts, on the part of the system, or whatever you call it, to put these ladies in command without properly training them and preparing for this onerous task? I'm not questioning the fact that they are capable of commanding. My question is, you put them in command, tomorrow will they be able to deliver by lack of training and things like that? Your views on this?
I'm glad you asked me this question. And I hope you read my recent article in which I had commented very extensively on the leaked letter of GOC 17 Corps General Rajiv Puri, which had made some very pertinent observations. Right. I have my views on this, and I need not necessarily be in agreement with the opinion in the street or the opinion at the highest levels, because I've been through this whole thing many times. And as the military secretary, also, I was required to put down on paper many times my views on this. So let me state. I think in 1991, we took a decision to induct ladies into the Indian Army. It was an environmental requirement because the world over it was happening. India was also changing. India was opening up at that time, and we took a decision when we started with a 5-year experiment. No one called it an experiment, but I think it was necessarily an experiment. 5 years, right? And ideally, I would say after 5 years, if a review had been done, a lot of people may have said, no, you must not have ladies in the army at all. A lot of people may have said that, right? A lot of you people would have perhaps agreed and said, no, I think we need to have a gender diversity, and we need to give reasonable equal opportunities. And the presence of women in the services has not affected our combat capability in any way. That's how the perception would have perhaps prevailed if someone had asked people that time. No, that is equivalent to almost saying, is 100% or 100% of the male officers of the army physically fit at all times and ready to go into battle? No. I'll deny that. They're not. So the word which I always like to use, optimization. We look for in all our decisions, we look for optimization so that it meets the demands of a situation in different ways, right? The army wants an inclusive gender sensitivity that is being provided, right? We have not inducted them into arms. We have not inducted them into supporting arms also at that time. We had only inducted them into services. Is it compromising? Partially. Maybe efficiency here and there. Maybe officer-man relationship, etc., etc. Right? As we progressed along, we came to the 10-year rule. We came to the 14-year rule. And then the demand started that why not? And the world had gone beyond. Human rights had suddenly become a much bigger issue around the world. India too was getting more sensitive. You see, I'm looking at it from an environmental angle. There are lots of things that in the army we would like to do to keep the army absolutely the way we have inherited it and the way it needs to be, in our opinion, something which ultimately is there to achieve victory. But in the middle, there will be obstacles, and there will be national level sensitivities which we have to be catered for. This is one of them. And that is why this whole issue went to the courts. Now, the execution part. Now, those who have commanded lady officers in the services, in many of the supporting arms, etc., a mixed opinion exists all across, 50-50, 75-25, whatever it be. There is a mixed kind of opinion which exists. Now, when it came to command, a lot of people would agree exactly with what you're saying. That you can't just hand over command like that. And command means it's not command of the arms. It is not the command of the fighting arms. It is the command of some of the supporting arms. Perhaps even in that case, combat or units which are used in combat are not necessarily being commanded or being handed over to lady officers. These are several other kind of units which are being handed over, right? And the experiment, essentially, these units are those where a lady officer is getting a chance to exercise a command over officers and men, right? This should have been experimented with. It should have been experimented. Perhaps a pilot project. Unfortunately, everyone seemed to be in a hurry to execute things. And the hierarchy of the armed forces perhaps were not able to sensitize the higher leadership, even the higher courts, that the army always liked to execute something with trial and error. What Jan Puri was essentially doing in his feedback was giving a report and analysis of 1 year of experience of looking at 8 lady officers. Maybe his observations were completely wrong. Someone else would have given him completely different views on the 8 lady officers in their corps, perhaps. But all this had to be taken with a pinch of salt, analyzed properly in-house without leakages here and there, without creating sensitivities, and taking this whole thing forward. Let's not look backwards. Now that decisions have been given, let's look forward how to optimize this. I, for one, would not at this stage would definitely not look for induction of women officers into arms, into fighting arms, not into the infantry, the armored corps, the artillery, the mechanized infantry. Corps of engineers, they are already existing, and some of them are doing a brilliant job. You just saw this happening at Wayanad recently, but that was obviously not in the face of the enemy, but in very, very grim, challenging situations, they have withstood those challenges and done marvelously as such. So I think, Jan Shankar, we are at a cusp at the moment. And uh, I would be reluctant at this stage to express anything negative on this decision. I would go along and say we need more time. And the hierarchy of the army should perhaps go back. There's nothing wrong. The legal system is very open. It will, I'm sure, perhaps even welcome some kind of a feedback from this. After all, national security is at stake. There's no doubt about it. National security is at stake, and that's actually the most important point in this whole thing. But the army can always say, we will train them better, we will give them more experience, we will give them more diverse commands, and then look progressively to see in 7-8 years' time where we can take them. No person who is in service and affected by the decisions at this time can demand that the army must give them command and must give them a particular type of command and things like that. No, that I would not agree with, because ultimately the bottom line is national security.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. You made the point very clear. If we had to give women command, we need to train them for command. And they need to be prepared to be as physically fit, show the same courage and the spirit of sacrifice, to achieve victory, irrespective of where they command. These are the qualifications of a commanding officer which we have brought out. And to that extent, I'm 100% with you. I think there is a requirement for us to rethink the whole affair and rethink it positively.
Yeah.
I'm also of the view that, look, much as I would not like women in the army itself, I'm an old-fashioned guy. But you have to go with times, and you have to accept certain things which are coming in. These are new things. Accept them, but you need to prepare for them. The question is, are we prepared for them? Are we open-minded in the way we are going to go doing things or not? Rather than making controversies about this whole affair like it has blown out into, I thought there was a requirement for cooler minds to sit together and think through the whole affair. I suppose that would be happening now, given the fact that the heat is off the table. So I will leave this at that.
I,
But
I would
I'm
end,
going to,
I would like a
yes, sir.
last comment from my side on this, and I 100% agree with you. I do feel that you can't put pressure on the army leadership to sort of hurry this whole thing up, roll it on, carry it on. This is a legal law order which has been given, etc. No, I mean, you can't. As I said, you're dealing with national security, and therefore people perhaps don't realize that you may give some command to lady officers of particular units which are not going into battle directly. But remember, in hybrid conditions, I have seen all kinds of organizations in the Kashmir Valley under attack. And that's the time when, it really, the commanding officer has to actually show himself or herself in frontline leadership. Those are very awkward and dicey situations. And it can actually lead to loss of lives among men by wrong decisions.
Yeah, I think you made two important points in this, sir. Loss of life of men and issue of national security. Both are at stake when you take the wrong decision to put women officers in command prematurely. It's an eventuality which has to happen, but I think the nation has to go through it with a bit of maturity and preparation, which I thought in this case was not there. I mean, that's what I felt like it's coming out thing. And like I am very sure, like you also are, that the army would do the right thing over the long distance. because that's what we are aiming for. I want to turn to something very even more important. Our commanding officers and our commanders. Now I'll take it a little higher also. Our brigadiers or GOCs, div commanders, are fully experienced officers who have gone through the thick and thin of operation and battle over the past 30, 40 years. And we are faced with a army like China, which is well equipped, it looks good, it looks shiny, all new equipment, everything, but which has not had 1 day's battle experience from 79 onwards. Or 79 is it Vietnam War, right? From then to now, it has not had. Recently, I heard a US commander say, look, at the end of the day, unless you fight with what you have and what you are capable of, it doesn't come on to battle. Things don't transfer to battle automatically. So, in this connection, I'd like your view on the experience, and especially from a leadership point of view, how it will weigh in tomorrow's, let's say, any scenario which comes up with China. And as an extension, with your experience on Pakistan, you might like to comment on that also.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I think those are very good questions. Let's talk first about the Pakistan Army. Seen it quite closely, spoken, met people, met officers in the United Nations, also sat across conference tables with senior officers, studied very interestingly. I studied the ethos of the Pakistan Army. And even while studying them, even while dealing with them many times on courses of instructions, etc., my discussions were never on. Obviously, the discussions can't be tactical because no one on the other side is going to tell you anything tactical. Used to be always on social aspects. From social aspects, you can decipher, as you are deciphering very correctly. From a social aspect of the Chinese, of the PLA, you are deciphering a lot. I was similarly deciphering a lot of what I learned from the Pakistan Army, of their social environment. I mean, I can admit that I went to the extent of asking such innocuous questions like, what do they eat in breakfast in the Pakistan Army? And they turned around and said, aloo and puri. And I said, you also eat aloo and puri? Kehte, aur kya khana hai humne? Humne bhi to wahi khana hai. So you see, these are the kind of things which it leads you on. You get a lot of ideas, how similar or how dissimilar are they from you, from your troops, etc. And you realize at the end of the day, they're almost the same. They're almost the same. Religiosity is also high, very high there. Passion is fairly high. If you go into 65, 71, I think Kargil is a very wrong example. Kargil only NLI units there sitting only in defensive operations, etc. But in 71 and in 65, 65 in particular in the Khemkaran area, some of the Pakistan Army units performed extremely well. And also in 71 in the area of Cham, in 65 also in the area of Cham. Of course, at the end of the day, on balance, the Indian Army achieved much more. But individual cases of valor here and there, unit valor here and there were very high. Some of the armored units, some of the senior armored commanders of ours who led the actions in the battles of Shakargarh, around Shakargarh, would always vouch for the fact that the Pakistani armor commanders were very, very professional, very good in their capabilities. So, to that extent, I think we are many times battling equals. 65, 71, perhaps they had better equipment than us. Today, I'm not sure what the status is. Pakistan does keep getting more and more weaponry from the United States from time to time, from the Chinese from time to time, not necessarily tested in battle. But they are definitely not completely inferior. And come to a hard grinding battle, their regimentation in the Pakistan Army is also of a high order. Leadership, the kind which is there. If you see the series on YouTube, the television series on YouTube called Alpha Bravo Charlie of junior leadership in the Pakistan Army. I've been recommending this to many times to people to get units in our army to watch it. I used to show it to people in JC Wing. it gives you an idea of the ethos. What is the ethos? If you are studying what is there in the academy of your adversary, what is being taught there? How is it being taught there? You can pick up a tremendous amount. Unfortunately, we don't do enough of it. We don't do enough of it. In our tactical war gaming, etc., we really don't paint adequately realistic pictures at all. Having said this, PLA. Very little is known about the PLA on this aspect. You see, because our interaction is not, ethnically very different. The Pakistan Army, you can align yourself with that thinking. There, you don't know, it's completely alien to you. I had a couple of PLA people with me in the United Nations. I could hardly converse with them. They were English speakers, but I could hardly converse with them because there was nothing common to discuss. We discussed a lot of things with the Pakistanis, and the Pakistanis were very friendly with them. The United Nations, in the UN, the Army, Indian Army, and the Pakistan Army are the best of friends. But here the PLA is very different. So for us to understand and get into the mind of the PLA is a difficult proposition. I would not jump to conclusions. No. I know there's a temptation on our part many times to equate and talk about Vietnam, what happened in 1979, various other things with the PLA and it's the negativities involved with it. Tum Dorong Chu 1986, we did not have any contact. 86, 87, we did not have any contacts. There were no battles there as such, so nothing has been really learned from it. So I would still hold my opinion on this. The temptation to say we are better. I will obviously say my army is better. My army is the fact that we could put up 50,000 troops in a mirror deployment on the line of actual control in a matter of 2.5 months or less is a great feat, a great achievement considering the kind of terrain we have got out here. To have so much of armor, artillery, ammunition, the kind of billeting, the kind of habitat that we have achieved, put up on top, logistics, everything, our capability is intact, perfect. Whether the soldier on soldier, that is the essential thing. Our experience in CICT operations is definitely helped us. That I can tell you. Right from Sri Lanka till today has helped us. To have bullets flying at you in combat conditions, it does steel you up for the ultimate test. To that extent, the Indian Army soldier is definitely of a higher order. But let me also then tell you some facts. A turnover of a unit, personnel in a unit is so rapid. It's so rapid that you have gone into an operation today in Anantnag, 3 years later, 50% of the unit is changed. They're not there. Right? So, the advantage which you have gained from all this on a man-to-man basis may not really accrue immediately in battle. And that's the reality. I don't want to sound very, very positive on this and say, no, we are cat's whiskers and we are the... I would still hold my horses on this. Wait for the first, perhaps, encounter. I hope it doesn't take place. I hope things are all good on the LAC. Things are going much better today. I hope it doesn't happen. I wish the PLA also well. There's nothing, we need to be on far, far better terms, the two armies themselves. But my reading at the moment is a little conservative, to sum it up.
Fine, sir. Which your reading of the Pakistani army is spot on for the simple reason that we've been exposed to each other, we fought against each other. Fundamentally, the same stock of people, the same thought processes, trained. The ethos is the same, running through the past century plus. And if we get into a fight tomorrow with Pakistan, it's going to be a tough fight, leaving everything else apart. And that's also been in evidence with all our skirmishes along the LC and in the hinterland. So we'll leave it at that. And coming to the Chinese, you sounded a word of caution. I'll go with you for the simple reason you are dealing with an unknown. And there's a requirement for us to go into more details to get to know this unknown better. Though
Absolutely.
superficially we do understand that they don't have the experience. There was conscript army. Their leadership is under severe stress thanks to Xi Jinping's mauling of, the army leadership. Uh, and the fact that, they're not used to high altitude the way we've been used to. I'm not talking of the those guys who were part of the PLA in 1962, but now at the same time, there's a other indication that they had no answers for operational snow leopard when it happened. They didn't. I mean, whether it's a failure of leadership or imagination or training, we don't know. But they couldn't maneuver in the mountains, and maneuver in the mountains is, I think, of utmost importance, contrary to what people believe. And that maneuver comes out of good soldiers and good commanding officers, because it is they who have to maneuver on ground. So it was not there, and plus a couple of personal experiences of mine and of their leaders. So it leaves personally it leaves me with a poor, left me with a poor impression. But having said that, I go with you to the extent that it's an unknown, and we need to be careful and
Circumscribed.
yeah before we blow our trumpets. But we need to go in the next fight with PLA if it happens with a lot of confidence of what we can do. I will leave it at that, sir. If you have anything else to add, you please add. Otherwise, I'll take a few questions with your
We'll
permission.
take a few questions. That's is good.
Yes, sir.
I can
Okay.
see some very nice
Uh,
questions here.
yeah, let me go with this. How would an officer regain the trust and respect of men in case of bad orders that would botch an operation or even lead to casualties? Do the men ever give you a second chance?
Very, very. It's a very appropriate question, and it's happened. Let me tell you, it's happened many times. Mistakes have been made. Uh, that is why they say an officer cannot say, "I'm a, I'm a frontline soldier." You, as an officer, cannot just be a frontline soldier. Then you are only a rifleman, nothing more than that. You have to have reasonable cerebral thinking, the ability to withstand pressure, the ability to think under those conditions. That's what makes you a commander. That's what makes you a different an officer in command. Otherwise, everyone else is brave around there waiting for your orders. So many times it happens, people who don't understand the larger picture sometimes send their men to death, to their deaths. They themselves may go with them. They may be very brave people. But if a case has happened where an operation has been botched and you had major casualties, etc., it, to my mind, is a very difficult situation to come out of subsequently. An officer usually will not get a second chance. And I've seen this happen in all over Operation Power. Or in Operation Power, many places I have seen this happening where wrong decisions led to casualties and the officer somehow never got a second chance to come out of it. But I would still say in long drawn out campaigns, like Sri Lanka was a long drawn out campaign, 2.5 years that we were there, right? Circumstances may come up. An officer is not going to be dismissed for this. Circumstances may come up where an officer volunteers uh, and when he's in command, no the men are with him. There is no chance of someone saying, "I will not serve under so and so," etc. In the army, orders are very, very clear. Hierarchy is very, very clear. That second chance, an officer hopefully will perform better, think much more, take more advice. But in more cases than not, I would say that second chance will not come.
Yeah, I think so too. So, and that's what history also tells us. In the recent past, uh, there are very few people who've been, successful in the second attempt. For the simple reason they probably might not get the second attempt, because in
Absolutely.
today's battle, today's combat conditions, no one will take a chance to give a second chance to a person to prove himself, because many more issues are at stake, like
And
national security,
I thought
inflation.
I saw in our common WhatsApp group, I saw a discussion taking place about Major General um, Kamta Prasad GOC Fordiv.
For divs.
Uh, it happened in '62. He was there in Sela at the last part, and he's the one under whose orders, not under his orders. I think a little earlier he had come out from there. Uh, they ascribed the failure of Fordiv to Kamta Prasad. And subsequently, he got a second chance in '65. He was given the command of Fordiv again, second
Again.
time. And this time, he bungled it even worse, in the sense
Yeah.
that his jeep got, I think, captured. His briefcase got taken away by the enemy, and entire marked maps were lost to the Pakistan army. And I think he never came out of that in any way. I think he was even demoted to an extent, if I can remember at that time. So these chances don't come your way second time.
Right. There's also an interesting question. So, if we keep the same bar for men and women, that would solve most of the problems. But the question is, can we do that without compromising the bar?
Ideally, your question is very good, first of all, Vineet. Ideally, when we talk about national security, when we talk about saving lives, we talk about not taking risk in terms of the integrity of the nation, etc. We must keep the bar at the same place. There's no doubt about it. But we are living in a realist world also, and a realist world, and we are living in a democracy. There will be pressures, there will be nudges here and there to compromise on certain aspects. I do agree that so far the nation has been very circumspect about not pressurizing its armed forces. For example, no reservation in the armed forces, which is a fantastic thing. There's no reservation in the armed forces, right? Uh, this aspect of lady officers is getting a lot of attention at the moment. And I would say that there is a universality about it where most countries around the world have gone for this. And gender sensitivity is an important subject around the world, an important social subject around the world. So it is being taken with a pinch of salt. And that's one of the reasons why we introduced it, because we are also a modern emerging nation. We are a democracy, and we need our women to go along with us, right? But to put them on the play field under equal conditions would be unfair. And similarly, getting them to compete here would be unfair. I would say to the place where competition should come is in the grading system, in the assessment which the commanding officers make. There should be no reservation to say that 25% of the vacancies or 10% of the vacancies are for lady officers. No, that must not appear. Right? Now you got a batch of officers of seniority, let's say 2015. You have so many lady officers, you have so many male officers, you have, okay, 40 of them competing from a particular arm, and there are just 15 vacancies. Well, those 15 must go to the first 15 in the merit. No reservation here. The system which we have followed of no reservations must continue.
Thank you, sir. The next question is also, yeah, yeah. Sir, war rules. Oh no,
Yeah, it's just gone up. Yeah.
yeah. War rules in place. What if a woman soldier gets captured by enemy during a combat or a war, a women who want to join army are made aware of this or sensitized to this.
The training in the academy, well, 1991 it started. I will admit I am not aware whether this aspect is included and as part of the syllabus. If not, it should be, definitely. And but the ethos of the army and functioning within the army gives you this idea quite clearly to anyone who gets commissioned. You join your unit, you see the environment of the unit, you speak to your officers, the officers will speak to you. Your commanding officer will be in and out every other day, he will be speaking to you. There's no question that you will not pick up the finer aspects of what are the vulnerabilities in the environment and where you're serving. Uh, I would take my lady education officer with me very often as a brigade commander on the line of control. Whenever I was going to visit a particular post, I would tell her to come, let's go. We'll walk from there. She was physically very fit. She would walk with us. The commanding officer of a unit was there. My G3 was normally there, or someone, whoever was there, and we would walk along. I'm sure she would be equally sensitive to all that was being spoken about and addressed there. I'm not certain if this is officially brought to her. For example, like reading of the Official Secrets Act, which is done every year. Shankar knows that whole thing, which we sign every year, that we are aware of the Official Secrets Act and what are the implications of that. I don't think that kind of a awareness is being brought upfront to the lady officers.
This is on command. So next question. Sir, to be in command is a lonely life. The authority and responsibility is vested in the commander with no scope for a second opinion at the tactical oblique operational level. Your views.
Very good question. Thank you, Akash. I still believe, one of my strong points I believed always, and I speak about this in the corporate world very often, is the aspect of what I call decisions by consensus. Many times decisions will have to be taken by you alone, lonely, right? Now, in this case, you're not talking about a commanding officer alone. I mean, let's take it in command at different levels. Let's first peg it at a commanding officer level. A commanding officer, the colonel, is in command of 850 men of an infantry battalion, right? He's got a second in command, who may be a couple of years junior to him, quite junior to him. In fact, sometimes these days, 4, 5, 6 years junior to him. There would be a couple of other young officers. You will have an RMO, who will also be a reasonably young medical officer. You will have your Subeda Major and a couple of JCOs. Now, the wisdom of some JCOs, in every unit, there are some very, very competent JCOs with whom you can actually discuss. It often happens that the battle procedures are such where you get certain orders at the brigade level, you've gone there, discussed with your commander, you got certain decisions from him, certain directions from him, you come back immediately, call for your Oscar group, your orders group, and brief them as to what are the directions, etc. I, for what, would always take a feedback from my orders group, from my 2IC, and Subeda Major Saab, who's always there, even include him on this aspect of motivation and morale, right? I agree with you to an extent. A commanding officer doesn't get that kind of an advice from a peer level personality. He doesn't. Unlike a corps commander. As a corps commander, I could call my chief of staff. I could call my BGS. I had a couple of excellent other brigadiers. I would call my BGS intelligence. Ask his opinion. Many times my Colonel MS gave me better advice than anyone. So at higher levels, this advice is available. And decision by consensus there is easier. At the commanding officer level, you are absolutely 100% right. You are very lonely. And you are alone in your decision making as to how you play. Most times you will get most directions, but at the end of the day, on the ground, when the situation changes and contingencies arise, you are the only one left to take this decision. There's no doubt about it. And the more you are trained to do that, the better it is for you.
So, great discussion and topic. What are your views about known combat leadership in Mahabharata and Ramayana versus modern Indian combat leadership?
That's an interesting one. Absolutely. Now you see, in the epics, you were dealing with superheroes. You were dealing with people, gods, demigods, gods, and whatever decisions they took, whatever they spoke, whatever was analyzed, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, all have become examples of leadership in life. In fact, it's a philosophy of life. So, of which one can't be very, very critical as such. Modern Indian combat leadership is very, very complex. Very, very complex. There's no doubt about it. As General Shankar just spoke to us before this, the diversity of situations that come in front of you, wherever a loss of life is possible. Forget everything else. It's not loss of life is not only by shooting bullets at you or by shelling or anything else. What about those people who are living in certain areas where avalanches come on them, or a patrol which has been sent out by you for an important assignment comes suddenly under um, an avalanche. I'm guilty. I know it. I live with that guilt. 13 of my good men died because of a wrong decision by someone on top. And I still regret I was not man enough, I was not a leader enough to contest that decision at that moment. I waited and said, I will contest it. But by the time I was about to contest it, the event had happened. 13 good men died. 5 soldiers and 8 porters of mine died. In a place which the person who was making the decision on top had no idea about. He had no idea. So, modern day leadership is not just about enemy action, it's also about disasters, it is also about climate change, it is a lot about hybrid conditions of war, etc. These kind of things perhaps did not exist in the days of the epics. That's my response.
Yeah, I think so, sir. Just add one point. You see, if you want to see leadership in Mahabharata, Ramayana, today, everywhere, one thing stands out. You see, the issues which you draw from your epics are all about character. And it is the
True.
character which makes the difference between a good and a bad leader. And in combat also, it's the character which actually decides whether you're victorious or you're a loser, or you can turn adversity into victory. So the character is a common thing. The other conditions do keep changing, but we'll leave it at that. I think that's the stick. So the last question. Uh, Amitesh has asked this question twice. How do you rate US commanders? I suppose how would you rate US commanders vis-a-vis Indian commanders?
I've dealt, I've
Very
dealt,
well.
I've
Yeah.
dealt with the U.S. Army in the sense of having visited the United States on courses, on interactions and seminars and things of that kind. I've read a lot about them and read a lot on the Second World War, read a lot of the First World War. I do feel the U.S. Army, first of all, is a very, very professional army, right? Granted that they are very, very strict with their spirit, ethos, discipline. They don't compromise on it at all. Just like we don't. We also don't compromise on this. If you go and see our academies, you go and see our units on an everyday basis. There is no slippages in that at all. Their commanders are better read than our commanders to a great extent, because the reading habit, the study, professional study, is encouraged to a far greater extent in the US Armed Forces. Many of us who have done courses of instructions in US Armed Forces institutions would remember the amount of study that you have to do there. I have done courses of instruction both in the US and in the UK. I can tell you the UK was a cakewalk comparatively. The US would not relent. They made you do it. And then they always spoke about the importance of cerebral achievement alongside your physical courage, physical achievement, etc. The two had to be optimally combined. Here, in our case, we also do a lot of that. We do a lot of it. But unfortunately, in our army, there's one or two things which I must admit in our armed forces, maybe in our army more than the armed forces. We tend to leave our officers too early, let them fall by the side. In 15, 16 years service, 50% of our officers, and in the case of EME, engineers, signals, etc., 70% of our officers fall by the wayside, which means they are not impaneled, not for promotion. And we don't even give them what is that, NFU, non-functional upgradation. We don't even give them that because the government of India has not given that to the army or the armed forces. So they continue serving for the better part of 16 to 18 years in low esteem, low comparative esteem, in different appointments which are from time to time created more than anything else. And that doesn't happen in the US. In the US, you may be on the fast track of promotion, but even if you are not, you are doing something which you want. You are identified as a specialist in some other domain, and you continue. You may be a major or a lieutenant colonel for the rest of your life, but you continue to be a specialist in that field and keep contributing. That we need to evolve a system like that in our army to bring up the average capability of our overall of our commanders in an overall way.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for this excellent exposition on leadership. Because I thought for the army as a whole and the armed forces as a whole, we need this kind of a discussion, which simply doesn't happen much. We can talk of Pakistan, we can talk of China, we can talk of what's happening in Syria and all those places, but we need to talk of what's happening in our armed forces and how they go about doing their daily business and how to make them better. This is just an earnest attempt I'm making. And for all our viewers, this is the third in the series. The first, I spoke about women officers in command. And the second, I spoke about, leadership or command being a privilege. And the third is now today on, leadership and command and command and combat. What's very interesting, I must tell all who are listening is, all the three officers who have spoken have commanded the corps in Srinagar. I picked all of them up with an ulterior motive of someone who's been in the thick of combat. And all three have spoken, and if you see all these three episodes, you'll get a picture which is coming out. And this is not the last one. We're going to talk more about this because I think this is a far too important subject we don't discuss enough about.
We just don't. We don't discuss this enough. I'm surprised actually the Army War College itself has just one leadership seminar in a year.
Yeah.
That or nothing more than that. We need hundreds of these all the time.
Yeah, with this, sir, thanks a lot, sir, and thanks a lot to all those who have joined in.
Compliments,
If you have,
compliments to you for having put this together very well. I enjoyed speaking on this. I came completely unprepared, and so I spoke from my heart whatever I had to speak. Thank you very much.
thank you,
God
sir.
bless.
Thanks a lot, sir, and good evening, and Jai Hind, sir.